so yeah, so I was going to talk quickly about focus area 1. So that's understanding the problems in schools. And we have sort of 6 members of this focus area: Paul, myself, Fanchun, Adam Boys, Mark Winterbottom, and Chris Payne. And through these 6 members, we cover quite a wide range of expertise. So the physics and modelling of flows, the effect of pollution on health, aerosol science and measurement, and education. So we're hoping this will give us kind of the opportunity to get a broad understanding of the problems. Something we've been discussing a lot in our monthly meetings is the seminar series, which we feel has been pretty successful so far. The sort of talks have mostly focused on things like the physics of ventilation and pollution measurement, and we're hoping future seminar series will also cover topics in medicine, and also get the kind of perspective from schools and teachers and parent representatives. We think it's important at this stage to understand the kind of motivation between an interest in improving air quality in schools, like what the motivations are from the kind of relevant stakeholders. We've also been reading a lot of the literature, trying to identify kind of what the key unknown questions are. Our kind of conclusion so far is that the issues are generally well known and well documented. There's a lot of fantastic research out there measuring pollution in schools and the different types of pollutants and which are the most important. And we think that sort of what we're hoping to do over the course of this project is to think a lot more about the effectiveness of solutions, and also thinking about more about the effect of learning as well as on health. There's already some great research on learning, but we think that's probably interesting from the perspective of wanting to get schools involved. So the first step is to identify these key and unknown questions. That's going to be kind of one of the ways we want to kind of help direct our small grant awards, which I know you'll hear a bit more about later. And that's everything.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Megan. We'll go on now to focus area 2. It's going to be introduced by Nick Karslow. So over to you, Nick.
Yep. Okay, so I'm just going to talk very briefly about what we've been doing in FA2, and our focus area is all around understanding solutions. So the group is headed up by myself and Alan Short from Cambridge. So I'm from York, and then we've got Henry Burridge and Leora are also part of the group. The other thing to say is that since we've started, we've got some of our partners are also attending our group meetings now. So there's a group working at a company called Immaterial in Cambridge that are looking at ways of removing pollutants from air. So they're now attending our meetings. We've also got representatives from EarthSense, and we've also had a couple of representatives from this company that have attended our group meetings as well. So that's been really useful just for helping us think about the practical applications of some of the research that we've been looking at. So we've been thinking about interventions and looking at some of the literature on the things that you see on the screen here. So we've basically split these into internal interventions, so things around retrofit, ventilation, but also external interventions, so what's going on outside the schools, so things like traffic interventions, green and blue spaces. So I'm not quite sure what we're going to do with this information yet. We're still discussing whether that will be part of a literature review for our group, maybe part of a bigger literature review for TAPAS, or I think what we're probably a bit more in favour of is that we develop, and again, whether it's just our group or the whole network, some sort of interactive database. And obviously that's easy to say. It would need a lot of thought about the different levels of how people might interact with that. So we've been having monthly meetings, and within that, like I say, we've been discussing the interventions. We've had lots of presentations from some of our partners, which have been really good and very informative for us. Alan has already carried out a preliminary characterization of school buildings around the UK, which has been really helpful actually, because what it shows is that there are probably maybe 4 to 5 different types of school buildings, very broadly, that are typically used around the UK. And what that has started up is it's given us the grounds for an MSc project, which is going to be going on for the next few months in York. And what that MSc project will be looking at is further developing Alan's work, looking at characterization of school buildings, and then working with an indoor air quality model that's been developed at York. He's thinking about how those different buildings might link to indoor air quality, and whether we can say anything about whether different designs are better or worse. So that's an exciting development. We will obviously continue our monthly meetings, and we're always continuing to seek new partners. So we've got new partners coming to our next monthly meeting, for instance. And that is it. A very quick overview, but hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you very much, Nick. And we're going to move on to focus area 3, which is about prioritizing solutions. And I believe this is going to be a double act between Mike and no, I've forgotten. Mike, are you going first?
Yes, I'm going to go first.
Right. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Just let me sort out a bit of sharing here. So hopefully that is now being shared.
Yeah, that's fine. I can see that.
As Paul said, I'm going to start off and then I'm going to hand over to Run Ming. And focus area 3 is about prioritising. So what's prioritisation about? Well, first of all, it builds on the results from the previous focus areas that you've just heard about, dealing with defining the problem, defining what solutions are out there. And with respect to those solutions, we need to recognise that resources for improvement will be limited, both in terms of the money that's available, the expertise that's available within schools, and so on. So we need to identify what practical measures will bring the most benefit for the money and other resources that are available. Now, the process for prioritisation first considers identifying the current situation and what can be done about it. As you've heard, that's being very much done with through the earlier focus areas. So we need to understand what the sources of pollution are that are leading to poor air quality in schools, understand what the impacts are, understand what the possible control measures are. Consider interactions between control measures. Some of these, there is a tendency, I think, for people to regard control measures as being sort of rather separate from each other. But often there are some quite extensive interactions between them. I'm most familiar with those, regarding those interactions in relation to outdoor air quality. I'm sure it also applies to indoor air quality. We need to, following on from that, we need to properly characterise the control measures with respect to costs, with respect to their effectiveness and so on, and assess the overall cost effectiveness of those measures. When it comes to making improvements, so that's rather, identifying the current situation is kind of looking at the data that we've got. Making improvements, that is about providing a bridge from the earlier tasks to the focus area 4 that we'll hear about shortly. So we need to look at the measures that can be taken independently by schools. We need to understand what interest there is from the stakeholders. We need to understand things like the availability of finance if we're to come up with a credible prioritisation for these for the measures. We are building on existing frameworks, and the Clean Air for Schools framework is one already being used, so it is a practicable solution already. It's got existing links to schools, providing us with a link to the most important stakeholders, and there's a willingness from those involved with it, as you'll hear shortly, to take on board information from TAPAS. So it, as far as focus area 3 is concerned, we are looking on that as a really useful opportunity to develop this, this prioritisation process. I'll hand over now to Rami.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Before I start, if you don't mind, I would like to mention our focus group members: Fanxin from Imperial, Elsa from London South Bank University, and Leora from UCL. We are the members of the focus group. So I just add a little bit more about the work done so far. This work is about the literature reviews jointly with the contribution from our international partners, Chongqing University, using the centimetric analysis of the analysis for the existing bibliographic studies. So from this left image, we can see over the last decades, the school-related research demonstrates a very sharp increase. Next slide, please. Yes. Yeah. So we used this method and analyzed a large amount of literatures, over 365 literatures from the existing literatures, and did some clustering, identified the indoor and outdoor sources of the pollutants within the school. And then we try to identify the improving measures and the health effect, and try to propose the new research methods and the trends. Next slide, please. Yeah, so from this, this is just an initial study. We are going to further study the literatures, including the existing policies and the standards, existing tools, etc. And this will help us to identify the research trend. So next step, we look forward to collaborate with all the other group and to synthesize, identify the factors and prioritize the key issues. So this is the goal of our group. So I think that's all from me and our group. Yeah. So the details are on the slides, because the time I will not extend too much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Runming, and also Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very helpful. And finally, for focus area 4, I think Mark Winterbottom's going to present what's been happening with them.
You're absolutely right. I'll just share my screen. I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, I appear to have subtitles on as well, so very useful. So focus area 4, which is dissemination and participation. Larissa from Global Action Plan and myself are the co-chairs, and likewise we've been having monthly meetings too, and we've been expanding our membership quite considerably, and I'll just pop up as many names as I think I have recorded, but if I've missed, oh, hang on,
you're not sharing.
I'm not sharing. There we are, that's better. I've got as many names as I think I've got recorded, but if I've missed anybody, then I apologise. So that's us. in terms of what our remit generally is, you'll remember this from the last network meeting that Larissa presented. We feed into focus groups 1, 2, and 3, we think, in the 2 questions on the left, which are vertical. What support do schools need to tackle air pollution? What's the best way to reach schools and secure impact? We then help focus group 3 in terms of sharing the tools and resources that are prioritised. And we help all the focus groups on the right-hand side by communicating the outputs of the focus groups to schools throughout and at the end of the project. So at the end of last presentation, in the last network meeting, we set 3 goals, if you like, or 3 things that we were heading off to do. So I'll report back on those. So our first one was develop a network of schools articulating the case for action. And so we've written 2 questions. Well, there's been this first questionnaire, which is essentially offering free resources and trying to get and recruit as many schools as are interested in response. So we've had a fairly good response to that. We've got a few more sets of stakeholders to engage with, and we're certainly expecting over 100 schools to be signed up as almost as affiliates with TAPAS and in full contact with us. Second one was to engage with the stakeholders to establish the support that they need, and the best approach is to engage them in taking control of air quality in their context. And that pretty much mirrors those 2 questions there, which you saw a minute ago. We've got a second questionnaire ready to go out, which explores those 4 questions there. What are schools doing already? Where do they get support? What would make them take action? What support do they need to take action? I think that will go out probably at the start of May, once our response rate starts to tail off for the first questionnaire. So in other words, we're then targeting a fairly sensible network of schools. And then finally, that develop those approaches of stakeholders, drawing on the outputs of FG 1 to 3 in the literature. And that's obviously still that's not got going yet. And focus area 3 have just referred to the Clean Air for Schools framework, which I think will provide quite a good vehicle for that going forward. What's next for us in the immediate term? Well, remember, we're in communication and participation, and in terms of the work packages, in terms of work package 1, we'll continue to map and enrol stakeholders, including and beyond schools, to develop the network more widely. And then we'll provide input to focus areas 1 and 3 on citizen science and other approaches, exploring their efficacy. And we may, there seem to be some opportunities for us in the current association with Waltham Forest via a different project, looking at teacher agency and ownership of air quality in the classroom. And then in terms of work package 2, with school leaders, research current and future challenges, barriers to action in more depth, alongside teachers' perceptions of the impact of air quality on learning and behaviour. Again, we think that can be done via the association with Waltham Forest, or at least started. And then there's some preparation of classroom materials for GCSE or A-level, focusing on air quality. And Larissa from Global Action Plan and PHE are likely to bid for some Met Office funding alongside TAPAS, which will give us a vehicle to do that. And I think, yeah, that's right.